There are moments in life when you stand between what is chasing you and what is blocking you. Behind you is fear. Before you is impossibility. You cannot go back, and you do not see a way forward. Scripture captures this human experience with unmatched clarity in the story of Moses and the Red Sea. The Red Sea is not merely a historical event. It is a theological statement. It reveals how God saves, how he leads, and how he displays his glory when his people are trapped by circumstances they cannot control. This account shows us that divine deliverance often comes when all human options have expired. Today, we will walk carefully through Exodus 13 and 14, unpacking the historical context, the spiritual symbolism, and the enduring lessons of faith, obedience, and divine power. This is not only Israel's story, it is the story of every believer who has ever faced an impossible situation. After 400 years of slavery, God finally breaks the power of Egypt through the 10 plagues. Pharaoh, crushed by judgment, releases the Israelites. Yet Scripture is deliberate in telling us that God does not lead them by the shortest route. God led the people around by the way of the wilderness toward the Red Sea. Exodus 13:18. The direct road through Philistine territory would have been faster, but God knew the spiritual condition of his people. They were physically free, but mentally enslaved. Immediate warfare would have driven them back to Egypt. Here we learn an important principle. God's path is not always the shortest, but it is always the safest for our faith. He leads according to our capacity, not our impatience. God also gives Israel visible signs of his presence. A pillar of cloud by day, a pillar of fire by night. These were not symbols alone. They were active manifestations of divine guidance. God was not sending Israel ahead while remaining distant. He was walking with them. Soon after Israel leaves, Pharaoh regrets his decision. The economy of Egypt depended on Hebrew slave labor, and the loss is unbearable. Why have we done this, that we have let Israel go from serving us? Exodus 14:5. Pharaoh mobilizes the strongest military force of the ancient world. 600 chosen chariots, all the chariots of Egypt. Trained soldiers. The text repeatedly emphasizes that God hardens Pharaoh's heart. This does not absolve Pharaoh of responsibility. Rather, it reveals a sobering truth. Persistent rebellion eventually results in God confirming a person in their chosen path. Pharaoh represents the power of sin and oppression. It does not release its grip willingly. Even after apparent defeat, it attempts to reclaim what it has lost. Israel arrives at the Red Sea with mountains on both sides and Pharaoh's army approaching from behind. The people panic. Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? Exodus 14:11. Notice how quickly fear rewrites memory. Slavery becomes preferable to uncertainty. This is a recurring human pattern. When faith is tested, the past is romanticized. Israel accuses Moses, but their real struggle is with trust. They had seen the Nile turn to blood, the death of the firstborn supernatural deliverance, yet fear silences testimony. Moses responds with one of the most powerful declarations in Scripture. Fear not, stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord. Exodus 14:13. Faith does not deny danger. It refuses to surrender to it. In a surprising moment, God speaks to Moses. Why do you cry to me? Tell the people of Israel to go forward. Exodus 14:15. This command appears illogical. Forward is water. Forward is impossibility. Yet God often demands movement before explanation. Moses is instructed to lift his staff, a symbol of divine authority. The same staff that struck the Nile now confronts the sea. God uses familiar instruments to produce unprecedented miracles. This moment teaches a critical lesson. Faith often requires action before evidence. Obedience precedes understanding. The pillar of cloud moves behind Israel, separating them from the Egyptians. Darkness covers Egypt, while light shines on God's people. A strong east wind blows all night, and the sea divides. The waters were a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. Exodus 14:22. This is not symbolic language, it is miraculous intervention. God creates a path where none existed. Israel walks through on dry ground. The sea, often associated with chaos in ancient thought, submits to the Creator. Creation obeys its maker. Pharaoh's army pursues Israel into the sea. But the very path of salvation becomes the instrument of judgment. God confuses the Egyptian forces and disables their chariots. Let us flee from before Israel, for the Lord fights for them. Exodus 14:25. When Moses stretches out his hand again, the waters return. The sea closes, destroying the army completely. This moment reveals a sobering truth. What saves God's people destroys their oppressors. Neutrality before God's power is impossible. The Red Sea is a picture of salvation. Israel contributes nothing but obedience. God does all the work. Paul later connects the event to baptism. All were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. 1 Corinthians 10:2. It marks a definitive break from the old life. God states clearly that his purpose is glory. I will get glory over Pharaoh. Exodus 14:17. Deliverance is not merely about comfort, it is about revelation. God may lead you into impossible situations to reveal his power. Fear often speaks louder than memory. Faith must speak louder still. Obedience activates divine intervention. Deliverance may require stepping forward before the way is visible. God's victory is complete. What he defeats does not return. When Israel stood on the far shore and saw the defeated enemy, Scripture says, Israel saw the great power that the Lord used against the Egyptians. So the people feared the Lord, and they believed in the Lord and in his servant Moses. Exodus 14:31. The Red Sea teaches us that God specializes in finality. What enslaved you does not survive the crossing. The sea that looked like death becomes the doorway to freedom. If God brought you to the edge, it is because he intends to take you through.